Good morning. It is the morning after a very disappointing night before. Just heartbreak, really. England losing in the finals of the Euros last night. And it just sort of feels like the whole country is a little bit flattered this morning. We're here today with Andy Dunn, Chief Sports Writer of The Mirror, who was at Wembley last night, who's going to talk us through what happened, answer any of your questions, send in your questions, and let's just sort of start off. So the Mirror's front page today said heartbreaking. Was it heartbreaking? Was it heartbreak?
You know what, Alison? It actually feels more heartbreaking this morning than it did last night. I know we've already got a comment, Janet, saying that we were both winners. Well, you know, it felt last night your instinct was to sort of feel sorry for the England players and to feel proud. That was your instinct. You know, when they missed that final penalty, the instinct was to, you know, put a metaphorical arm around them and say, "Listen, lads, we're still proud of you." There you go, an arm round like Calvin Phillips is putting his arm around Bukayo Saka there and say, "Listen, we're really proud of what you've done. We're proud of the journey that you've been on. We're proud of the way you've united a nation." That was your instinct last night, and that's good and that's right, and that's what I think a lot of the papers, a lot of the coverage this morning reflects. But you know what? It's strange. Now I wake up this morning, there's a bit of me thinking, well, you know what? That remains still an opportunity missed. You know, I've waited a long time covering England to cover them in a final, and for them to get beaten in a final still hurts. It is heartbreak. It feels more heartbreak now to me this morning than it actually did last night. That's a strange feeling, but that's what it feels like.
Because I think it was just so close but so far, isn't it? And that goal really early on. I mean, inside Wembley, when that first goal went in, it must have just been amazing, was it?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. But you know, we have got a habit, England, of scoring early in games, and sadly, we've got a habit of conceding those leads. You know, we've been around long enough to know that, you know, don't start getting ahead of yourself. But I mean, but having said that, we have scored early in this tournament and held on to it and shown that we can hold on to it. So you thought they might just do that, but yes, the atmosphere was incredible. I mean, I'm sure we'll come on later to say there were some issues of fans getting in without tickets, but even so, actually within the stadium, it wasn't particularly pleasant outside the stadium. Yeah. But inside the stadium, it was a great atmosphere. And when that went in, you could see the players as well were lifted by it. And then you actually thought to yourself, you know what? We've seen England so often sort of try and rest on their lead and, you know, just be a bit cautious and cagey. And that's what they were in the end. That's what cost them. Yeah. Everyone was screaming for them to go for the jugular. But yeah, it was great, and it's been a great atmosphere throughout the whole tournament. You know, let's not forget that, you know, the atmosphere surrounding these England games, both at the matches and across the country, has normally, and there were exceptions last night, been first class.
Yeah. And I think it was an interesting tournament because coming at the end of 15 months of the virus and people hardly been out their front doors, let alone at mass events like this. It sort of had this real sort of sense of liberation, this sense of like, we've come through this horrendous thing. And did it almost feel like the culmination of that last night?
It did. It did feel exactly like that. I mean, to be honest with you, it actually felt a bit like that even during the Germany game, and during the semi-final against Denmark. It felt like that at Wembley. You know, and it felt like that. I think, you know, just talking to my mates who were watching it, you know, at the friends' houses, in the pubs and the fan parks. It did. It very much felt like that. You know, it's all of a sudden you're allowed. You know, people were on the streets early. People were gathering early because they haven't been allowed to gather for so long. You know, it really was. This is the first big, you know, I mean, mass gathering. We forget what they were like. You know, it was, you know, 16, 18 months previous. So I do think that was a major part of it. You know, it was slightly odd at times, the sort of juxtaposition of England players in this very strict bubble. You know, 26 of them, very strict bubble, and then they turn up, and there you go, 66,000 people. I mean, I went to Wembley obviously for every game, and I went to Wembley for the game against Denmark last Wednesday, 66,000 people, and then I couldn't go to my daughter's school sports day the day after.
Yeah, it's been crazy like that. But I mean, you could probably write a book about this, and perhaps you will, Andy. But what is it about football that unites the nation? I mean, obviously, we'll get to the sort of absolute scumbags around the edge later. But what is it that predominantly unites the nation in a way that really no other sport, no other music, no other culture really does?
No, and it's a phenomenon, you know, that seems to have grown. And I think think there's so many strands to it. One, of course, it has always been the game that everyone can play. You don't need to be from any particular background to play football. You just need a ball and a wall to kick it against, basically, or two jumpers to put down for goalposts. And it's also, and which is very important, of course, it's a sport that is played in the main across all, it's so inclusive. It's played across all cultures, all races tend to play football. It is a very, very, by its very nature, a diverse sport, and you only have to look at the composition of this England team to realise that. So it brings people together in that way. And I do think also the narrative about it being so long since England won something, it's just going and going. I mean, and that was, so now we get behind it. I mean, in this particular instance, of course, we've got a very likable manager, a guy who knows how to communicate, a guy who's very compassionate, a guy who can speak, well to people. And obviously everyone can relate to these guys now, these players who are doing such great things on and off the field. But it's just a game that, and it's everywhere else. And we're not exclusively passionate about football. There was Brazil, Argentina in the Copa America this weekend. I mean, the scenes, in South America are immense. I'm sure the scenes in Italy last night were great. It is just a sport that anyone can play, and it's just a sport that seems to evoke more passions than any other.
It really does. I mean, the comments that are coming up as we're talking are all so positive about the team. In that, I can remember, as I'm sure you can, Andy, tournaments in the past where something has gone wrong, and within minutes there is vitriol against the players, against the manager, against the selection, against the. Do you think this time? I mean, obviously, there are some decision making that might be questioned at some point, but there's generally a sense of pride more in what they have achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I mean, never mind vitriol. I can remember. I'm old enough to remember covering 1998 World Cup when there was an effigy of David Beckham hung from a lamppost outside a pub, and they were setting fire to it. I mean, for goodness sake, I can remember the level of abuse that the English players got, and it was terrible. And that, again, I'm sure we'll come on to it, but there is an element of that on social media at the moment. However, it's not the general feeling towards these players is one of warmth. They realize, they tried the best. They came up a little bit short. They tried the best. They're conscious of their role. It's an interesting subject about. There was a while ago when we would say you wouldn't hold footballers up as role models. You wouldn't hold England.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And now we're holding these people. We're holding Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford, Jordan Henderson. Yeah. These guys are doing things for the NHS. These guys are conscious. It's a very interesting thing that they've done. They've actually consciously decided, or felt the need, not decided as in a cold decision, that, actually we're in a position where we can connect with people and we can make a difference. And it's great. And it just shows as well, it's so good that you look today, and I think all during tournaments now, they're making themselves the front end of the newspaper as well, for good reasons. Yes, I'm sure you remember, Alison, when if football was at the front end of a newspaper, it used to mean probably one thing, that the fans were fighting in the streets. Yeah, and that's what it meant. Now you're seeing football at the front end of a newspaper for all the right reasons, for Marcus Rashford, for this England team, for the way they are conducting themselves. And that's why I think with all the comments, no wonder everyone is proud. They're a bunch of lads who we can be rightly proud of.
Yeah. So tell me, out of the team then, who were your superstars throughout the tournament in that England team?
My unlikely superstar of the tournament for me is Calvin Phillips.
Oh, I love him.
It's unbelievable. And bear in mind, a year ago, I'll tell you what date is today? 14th, July the 9th. So a year and 4 days ago, he was playing for Leeds against Stoke City in the Championship. They won 5-0. They went top of the Championship. And all Calvin could think of is promotion to the Premier League and then possibly staying in the Premier League. And now, a year later, he comes in, he plays every minute apart from, I think it was 25 in Rome, when he was only taken off as a precaution because they didn't want him to get another yellow card. And he's like the type of guy, it just shows that it's a very trite thing sometimes about, believe in yourself and, unlikely things can happen. But he's an absolute epitome of it. He's literally come from nowhere to be one of the key men in this England team. So he's one of my players, my England players of the tournament. I mean, Southgate again has been immaculate in the way he's behaved, and also the goalkeeper. I think, I mean, it was desperately unlucky. I mean, when you actually think of the football point of view, for him to save 2 penalties last night and still end up losing, you've got to feel sorry for him.
Yeah, no, it was great. And then to Southgate himself, I mean, there does seem this sort of like, it's almost like a book, isn't it? That, so for so long he was carrying those demons of the penalty that he missed.
Yes.
Now here we are finding himself at perhaps the furthest maybe England will ever go in our lifetimes. And again, it's a penalty decision which has got us to essentially where we are. I mean, what's your thoughts on him and how he'll take it all?
Well, you know what? Publicly, he'll be quite sort of stoic about it, and he will turn around and say, he'll point to, he's going to do a debrief with us today, and I'm sure he'll tell us, he'll want to accentuate the positives going forward. He'll want to accentuate the fact that they have a big core of young players who, I mean, the guys who missed the penalties are all young. And he'll want to sort of stress that going forward, the next World Cup is next year in Qatar. So, we haven't got long to wait. And he'll want to quite rightly stress all the positives about going forward. But you know what? I also know that for all his public persona, he is a fierce competitor. And the bottom line is he will be devastated by this defeat. He will have thought, particularly when they scored early on, they could have won that game. He would have thought that he could have got the better of Roberto Mancini. And he also knows, as you've just quite rightly said about not in our lifetime, he also knows that this type of chance is not going to come around very often. It really isn't. You're right. It could well be a once-in-a-lifetime chance for him. And they were a couple of penalty kicks away from taking it. So you can imagine how that'll feel. He often says to us that he barely sleeps for 2 weeks after he sleeps for almost an entire 2 weeks because he barely sleeps during the tournament. So hopefully he'll get some rest. And I just hope, I hope that he stays on. I think the FA will offer him a new contract. His current contract expires at the end of next year. And they want to keep him on. I just think, though, sometimes, when I'm talking to him, I wonder if it's such a bigger job than actually football being the England manager. It is literally, it's probably second only to, I don't know, the Prime Minister probably, isn't it? In terms of
but do you think some of the big clubs will probably come in for him at some point as well?
Well, I don't know. You see, if they did, I think he'd be extremely tempted. And I do think that's what he wants to do. So whether or not he goes after, I think he'll stay until 2022. I think he'll see us into the World Cup next year. And then I think he might go then. Because he's 50. He's also looking around, at clubs, who are paying fortunes to big managers, and he's only human. He's thinking to himself, well, these big jobs may not come around that often. And his stock is high, and it hasn't always been high in terms of, there's not, clubs haven't generally looked at him as the elite clubs. So if they do now, I think he'll be very tempted.
Yeah. And so looking forward to Qatar 2020, well, it'll be 2022. How do you rate our chances for that point then?
Oh, good. I mean, good. I don't rate them. I wouldn't say that. I mean, we were actually with the bookmakers, if you like a bet, we were sort of like favourites going into this, but we won't be, or amongst the favourites, we won't be favourites to win in Qatar. I mean, conditions will be, well, we don't quite know what they'll be. So in air-conditioned stadiums, how that'll work out. It's at a different time of the season as well. Normally, obviously, it's in the summer. This time it's going to be in late autumn, early winter. And so, but in terms of the squad and the players he has, yes, and they talk every camp says about how great the spirit is, how good the camaraderie is. Well, this actually, being around the camp as much as I could this time, that's actually right. These guys do feel like almost like a club team. The players who didn't even see, a minute of competitive action, Conor Coady, Ben White, Ben Chilwell, these guys behind the scenes, away from their families, young families, all of them, for 5-6 weeks. I know they're not incarcerated, but they're still billeted in a hotel, in the middle of nowhere, basically.
It must be tough for those players that don't get a single minute. I always think that's tough for them.
Conor Coady is a prime example. He's a lovely lad, and I'm not just saying that because he's quite a funny scouser, but he's a lovely lad, and he's got 3 young kids. I think they're probably I don't know, 4, 2, and 9 months. I don't know, I'm guessing there anyway. But he's got 3 young children, and then he joins up with England on May the 26th. And because of the COVID, because in previous tournaments, of course, they were allowed 1 or 2 days where they'd go and see the family, or the family would come to the hotel to see them. That wasn't allowed. They joined up at the end of May, and he's released from duty today. Well, last night, July the 11th, and and he hasn't played a minute.
Yeah, that must be tough, mustn't it? You've missed out on that amazing opportunity.
Yeah, and there's only and it's like and also he's only got, and okay, it's a nice hotel, but he's only got 25 other lads for company for 6 weeks.
Exactly.
I know when I cover tournaments, and you're with 25 colleagues, for 6 weeks, and you've got all the luxuries of being able to go out for dinner and being able to see other people. We go up to war with each other after about a week. We're fighting with each other inside 10 days.
So going back to the game just for a bit and what happened last night, I mean, I know a lot of emphasis has been made about the penalties, but do you think really we just lost it in the second half where it all just went a bit flat? And why did that happen?
Well, it happened. I mean, I think you have to give credit to Italy. It happened as these things do, for a variety of reasons, in the sense that Italy made positive changes early in the second half, which meant they got more control in midfield, and they played better. Technically, they were the superior side. I think that's a given. There's no getting away from that. Technically, they were superior to us. We had a way of playing in the first half, and that was a triumph for Southgate tactically. Yeah. But Mancini sussed that out. They got more into the game. But I do think, again, as you alluded to there, that there was an element of, which we saw actually when England lost against Croatia in the World Cup semi-final 3 years ago, and obviously England scored very early there with a Kieran Trippier free kick. And it was almost the same pattern last night. It's almost, but not quite, because we actually got beaten before going to penalties. But the tendency was to defend it, and we did. We were just a little bit too negative last night, inviting Italy on. They had a lot of the ball. They got, I think ended with 62% possession.
Yeah.
But you know what? Sometimes that's just instinct. England have defended so well in this tournament. And you think, hang on a minute, let's not make any mistakes. Let's defend. Let's hold on to what we've got. And there was an element of that, and probably that's why.
Should Grealish have come on sooner?
Oh well, I'm honestly, I mean, the whole country, I think, was probably shouting for Jack to come on. He's so popular now. Everyone calls him Jack. It's like when you get popular, you get known by your first name.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like some people we know, and I don't know. It's a tough one, because I think you got it just about right. I mean, if you bring Grealish on, first of all, who do you take off? Because he won't take Sterling or Kane off. He will not take Harry Kane off, in a big game like that. No, and probably not Sterling either. So it was a tough one. I mean, Italy were in control, and Jack Grealish doesn't really do much defensive work. But I don't know. With hindsight, maybe yes, but I'm not sure it would have made much difference, really. And also, I was a little bit disappointed that Grealish didn't stick his hand up for a penalty.
Well, but how does that work then? Because Southgate was saying last night that he decided the penalties, he takes full responsibility, it's all down to him, the order. But like little Saka there, he's only 19, bless him. The responsibility, it made me feel sick sitting at home watching it. I mean, how do you do that at that age? Should they have been an older head maybe doing them?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I remember back when I was 19. You were too nervous to go to someone and ask them, for the date. Yeah, exactly. So, and there he is. I couldn't believe when he went up. I mean, I could not. I was astonished. And okay, if it is, Gareth, as he would, takes full responsibility in saying that he made the list of penalty takers. Well, I'm sorry, but a guy who's been brought on as sub who has limited experience, who's 19 years of age. I just thought I don't understand it. Still don't understand it. I was shocked when he went up to take that penalty, particularly when you've got experienced players there who hadn't taken a penalty. Raheem Sterling, Jack Grealish, Luke Shaw even.
How much do you think it is? So how much is it what the players say they want to do, and how much is it what Southgate would have decided as to who did the penalties?
Well, they would have practiced them. So they practiced them in training. Obviously, they've got plenty of time to practice them. But obviously, I mean, we all know that it's absolutely impossible to even get anywhere close to replicating the atmosphere and the pressure that you've got when you're walking up in a European Championship final. It's just, if you're kicking a penalty, you know, in the depths of the Staffordshire countryside, you know, with a few people on the sideline, a few members of staff trying to boo you. It's not the same as knowing there's 66,000 people watching, and literally knowing that there's tens and tens of millions of people across Europe watch you. So that pressure is enormous. So basically, they take them and they will say to players like, right, you know, right, first of all, who is really confident? Because that's an important thing if you're confident at taking a penalty. So they will say who's confident. So, but that's in a situation then where if you're a young player and the manager says to you, "Are you confident of taking a penalty?" Then even if you're not, you won't want to say
yes, absolutely.
You're going to say, it's going to be absolutely. You'll think it's a sign of weakness if I say no. And so I think the manager has to take responsibility then for saying, okay, well, you might be confident, you might be saying, right, I'll volunteer for that penalty number 5, but I think the manager should be saying, well, listen, I don't want someone that inexperienced going up and taking that penalty. And I think he got that wrong. I think you're right. I think Raheem Sterling,
because he has been a superstar of the tournament, hasn't it? And it's going to be, and however many times people say to him, "Oh, don't worry about it," you know, it could have happened to anybody. You are going to carry that weight with you, and I mean that's true strength of character. Is if you come out that the other side, isn't it? And that you can keep going from there. But
yes, it is, and it's really unfortunate that, you know, I mean, bear in mind that you know, two superstars in Marcus, albeit young superstars, in Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho both missed. You know, Jadon Sancho has just been transferred for £80 million. Marcus to the same club as Rashford is at. So you know, and they were brought on specifically to take penalties. You know,
but then again, to be fair to those two, they'd like barely touched the ball, had they? When it was penalty time.
I know. So yes, and you think of the logic of that. Is that really, you know? I mean, the logic is they are clearly seen as good penalty takers. So let's get them on to do it. But then you're thinking, well, you bring them on and they haven't kicked the ball, you know, and Rashford never looked confident. But yeah, you're right. Going back to Saka, yeah, it is. It's something that, like, you know, it really will be. I mean, Gareth Southgate knows how long it can be with you for. But I guess, I suppose, on the flip side of that, you know, he'll be thinking, well, listen, I'm 19, and he'll be being told he's got many a tournament ahead of him. This guy, he's got many a trophy ahead of him to win, many an achievements that he will make, you know, in his club career, and he's such a nice lad. As you say, he's been a star, and I think, you know, hopefully, I think we'll probably be a more, in general, compassionate football watching nation than we have been in the past.
I think so. But going on to that point about sort of, you know, the slightly more unpleasant side of football. I mean, there's a question that's just come up there, really, saying, should England be allowed to host any more major tournaments? When you see like the fighting, you know, let's talk about the fighting and the gym and the people that tried to get into the stadium and all the rest of it. I mean, can we just not really be trusted sometimes?
Well, it's I saw that question there from, I think it was from Emma, wasn't it? And I told it's a very, very pertinent point, because I don't know whether, you know, people might not be aware, but we are hoping, well, in a joint bid with it's the United Kingdom and Ireland, I think, to host the World Cup in 2030. And last night, I have to say, will have done us absolutely no favours whatsoever. It really won't. I mean, you know, obviously our chief reporter Andy Lyons was there last night. He ended up sitting quite close to me, but you know, and you can read some of his dispatches from that trouble in today's Daily Mirror, and they were really, really, you know, not very pleasant scenes at all. I arrived at the stadium about, I don't know, about 4:30. Well, in the environment of the stadium, about 4:30. So 3.5 hours before kickoff, and it was bedlam. I mean, it was chaos, and there was, you know, people were. I mean, there's a broader issue here about, like, you know, why we seem to feel the need to turn any major event into, like, basically a sort of bit of a mass drink up, basically, you know, for want of a better phrase. And with an 8 o'clock kickoff, and we all saw the things on social media about people queuing up pubs at like 11 in the morning. The game's not kicking off till 8. And I suppose it was always that. The problem you've got with Wembley is that what normally would happen at stadiums, say, like I was in Rome a week last Saturday, they have an exclusion zone, which is about maybe, I don't know, half a mile even, a ring around the stadium, about half a mile radius, and you can't get in unless you've got a ticket.
But did we not used to do that at Wembley? That you didn't used to be able to get off the tube at Wembley unless you had a ticket? I mean, do you think it was? Yeah. Why has that changed then? Why is that not?
I don't know. You know, some of me thinks also. I mean, obviously Wembley now, because all the grounds surrounding Wembley, all the areas surrounding Wembley were sold for private development. So basically, you've got bars, restaurants, venues, and you just can't close those places. Hotels, it is so busy. And they just decided that everyone could go there. And of course, people ended without tickets. I have to say they're going to be, that there'll be a really serious inquiry into this, because the FA need to know what happened. I think Metropolitan Police need to know what happened. People were getting in with tickets. They don't have paper tickets anymore. And people had screenshotted tickets. They were letting them in. People were threatening stewards. And bear in mind, as we all know, these stewards are not well paid. The private security companies, who probably pay, if not the minimum wage. If you're confronted by, someone who's extremely aggressive to the point of threatening physical violence, unless they're allowed by, what are you paid for to fight with these guys, or that's the law's job, and that's what happened yesterday. It was left to the stewards. They were overwhelmed, and there were some pretty unpleasant scenes.
Do you think it's sufficiently serious that it could disrupt our chances of getting a World Cup?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I really do. I do. I think, listen, we will be in one shape or other. We will be there will be fines coming our way. We were fined just for the simple thing of, and not very pleasant thing of, when someone pointed a laser pen.
And then somebody got on the pitch as well, didn't they? As well last night.
Somebody got on the pitch last night, and it was so. I'm just not being too flippant, but if you had the Benny Hill theme music, it would have been appropriate. They chased him around the pitch for about a minute. And they couldn't get this guy, and he was hardly the quickest of movers. So they'll get fined for that, for the pitch invasion. You do get fined for that, and they will just generally look at it and just think.
But also, all those FIFA bigwigs that came in for the match, they will have all seen it and felt it themselves, and whether they felt comfortable with it, won't they?
Well, exactly. Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, he came straight from Rio. We'd obviously been to the Copa America, came straight in and came straight to Wembley to take his seat alongside Tom Cruise and David Beckham. And yes, he will have seen it. He will have been a little bit sort of cosseted from it, as these bigwigs are. But even so, it will be big news. And we've all seen the social media footage that's gone round of some very, very unpleasant fighting going on. So. Yes, it won't do us any good. They like England. They like England because ironically, because of the passion our fans bring. But they don't like this side of it, and I think it will be,
And he does. And then and then the other thing, which is obviously just horrendous, but also sort of felt so kind of like you sort of almost expected it, is that the online abuse that we've seen of the players, the racist abuse that we've seen of the players. Overnight and last night. It just feels so sad in that, we started this tournament with people booing at the taking of the knee, didn't they? And then you sort of felt that some of these idiots had just sort of realised that supporting England is about supporting England, and it's about supporting our players. And then all this goes again, and you just sort of think, are we just back to square one? What do you think?
Exactly, Alison. You summed up perfectly there. It was as predictable as it was depressing. It was, as soon as Bukayo Saka missed that penalty. Literally within seconds, you knew. We all turned around and said, "We know what's going to happen now."
Yeah.
And but basically, just because it's predictable, because it's depressing, we can't simply write it off as, oh, it's the work of some cranks on social media. It just has to be tackled, and people have to be, including everyone involved, and that's the social media companies, that's the football authorities, that's the police, that's the law, to track these people down. And yes, I know there may be some, cranky elements to it, but that's a cop out. It has to be pursued. These are young lads who social media is valuable to them in the sense that there's so much good that they do. They connect with so many people, and just the fight.
It's so sad that these people have got any voice at all, and that's why their voice, their influence has got to be taken away from them if they're going to act like that in the public space. And
absolutely,
it is a public space, and I think it just sort of just makes you wonder how far the country has come. I don't know. Am I being overly negative there?
No, I agree, and I think people also shouldn't you shouldn't. I mean, we know sort of probably in our profession to a limited extent how you feel, how hurtful it feels to when you when maybe you get abuse online, and it's not even comparative to what someone like Saka or Raheem Sterling gets when you're talking about his race, when they're talking about such heinous racial and personal insults. I mean, as I say, you get upset if someone sort of says, "Oh, you've written something rubbish or something," and you think how they must feel. It's terrible, and you do think, how far have we come? You do think sometimes, like, why are there so many people out there who cannot just wait for this to happen? Can't they see that how good it feels to have an England team, and so many people sort of behind this drive to be more diverse, to be more inclusive? It feels good. It's felt good for England. Why can't we trade? You compare at times.
But don't you think also, Andy, we've been talking about this issue about racism on social media for years and years and years now, and you just sort of think, why are we still having the same conversation? Why is it just not actually been sorted out now? But surely it can't be that difficult. I don't know. But I mean, the social harms bill apparently year is going to do something. But
well, people keep telling us that it is more difficult than we think. I mean, in particular, for example, from the actual mechanics of basically wiping this abusive filth off social media platforms, apparently is harder than we think. And when you speak to people about it who know about how these things work, they claim it is harder than we think. Well, if it's harder than we think, well, that's just tough. You'll have to make sure that you try harder to do it, because it's got no room, and it does encourage. Let's face it, it will encourage. When it's given more the oxygen of publicity, it will encourage sort of people to sort of, I don't know, take some vicarious pleasure in it. So it's with these guys, I mean, they will. They are very, very. Again, you alluded to Saka. They're strong lads. They are really tough and really sort of tough, caring lads who will try and not let this affect them.
And do you think that nowadays there's support there for players in the way that perhaps there wasn't back when Southgate missed his penalty? Do you think there's a greater awareness around mental health and all those issues for support?
Oh yeah. Oh, very much. I mean, very much. I mean, Gareth Southgate and the whole FA now, and I think they should take some credit as well, because we give them a bit of a hammering from time to time. But there is a much more holistic approach to the players and to the impact these type of things can have on them. There will be support. They have support. They have psychological support if they need it. They also have a very strong bond amongst each other. And as I say, they're also, they're all very, very aware as well of what's going to happen. This won't come as a surprise to them, sort of the reaction to this defeat. And yes, they will. I mean, they're incredibly. These people you see, a lot of these people, the likes, are brought through the work that the academies and the FA from a young age do. From the ages of 13, 14, these lads will be told this is, they're not just. It's nothing new to them. They will be having these lessons and wherever they will be taught this from a young age, and they are a strong, and a great bunch of young men. As I say, who've done us proud, and they'll know how to handle this.
They really have. I mean, so looking back over it all, I mean, what would your high point of the whole tournament be then, just as a closing point? Oh, I've lost you there, Andy.
Closing points. I think I'm going to be a bit of interference here, aren't I? Yes. Germany. I mean, England beating Germany. I mean, it's just a great old rivalry. It was a great night. It was the best atmosphere. Strange enough, I think of all the games at Wembley, the Germany game was the best atmosphere, and it doesn't get much better than that. That was great. My highlights: England, Germany.
Brilliant. Lovely. Well, thank you very much, Andy. We'll let you go and get some sleep now. I bet you had a bit of a long night last night. And thank you all for watching, and hopefully see you all again soon. Bye. Bye.